going to show you how to use cake dummies. These are styrofoam pieces, just foam blocks that are cut into different shapes, and they have wonderful, wonderful uses. The first use as a beginning decorator is to practice on these. These are great for covering with fondant or covering with buttercream icing and decorating. You can practice borders on the side. You can do all sorts of practice cakes using a styrofoam dummy. The second application for these is if you have a special cake coming up, whether you're a beginner or whether you're a seasoned professional and you've got a really special cake coming up, or you want to enter in a competition. It's great to do it on a dummy first. Make sure that all your cake is proportional, all your colors are right, and all your decorations are exactly the way you want them before you actually execute the actual cake. So they can be used as a dry run. The third and probably one of the most popular uses of cake dummies is adding them in tiered cakes or wedding cakes. You may have a bride or a customer that comes to you and says, I want a nice 4 or 5 tier wedding cake at my affair, but I'm only having 40 people. So you can do the top 2 or 3 tiers with real cake, and you can set them on dummy cakes for the bottom part, or vice versa. So this allows you to expand a cake and make it larger without adding servings. And the last and very common use is if you're in the cake business and you want to demonstrate or show your cakes at a bridal fair or a trade show or in your shop window, you can make all kinds of cakes in advance and on these styrofoam dummies, and they will keep for months and months and months. We also have a lot of people who now make their own wedding cakes, or businesses that make wedding cakes, and they'll make and decorate the cake on dummies maybe a week or 2 in advance, and then just do the top 1 or 2 tiers in real cake so that they can cut it at the ceremony, but the rest of the cake is served in sheet cakes out of the kitchen. This allows you to produce a lot more cakes, or it takes the pressure off you if you're making your own wedding cake and you don't want to have to worry about making the actual cake on the day of the wedding. So I'm going to very lightly spritz the cake dummy, and I'm just going to put a little bit of piping gel on my hand. Very little piping gel. you don't need a lot. I've probably, on this 8-inch dummy, I've probably used less than 2 teaspoons. Make sure you get some around the edges and right down to the bottom. And that will just leave it tacky. So if you're rolling out your fondant, or if you're in a dry situation, the humidity is not high, it's not going to dry out like if you just spritz it with water. So I'm going to quickly wash my hands and finish this. All right, the dummy is ready. I'm going to take my rolling pin and roll the fondant right around there and go right over the top. The first thing you do is just take out any air bubbles from underneath, just like a regular cake. And then I use the inside of my hand, the palms of my hands, and just gently press around that outside edge so it adheres to the top of the cake. And that way you won't get any pulling and stretching and all the little stretch marks at the top. And then just work it down. Just use it like fabric, pull it apart and work it down. When you're covering a cake dummy, you can roll the fondant a little bit thicker than you would for a cake. It actually makes it a little easier to cover, and you get a nice coating on the a nice finish on the dummy. So I'm just bringing that all the way down to the bottom. Just keep separating it and pushing it in. There. And when I get all the way down to the bottom, I like to take a pair of scissors. I always cut straight up first. The reason I do that is as I'm cutting around, I don't want the weight of this fondant that's being cut off to pull and tear it up the side. So by making a cut vertically first, as I start cutting off the excess, there's no pressure. There's no weight on this fondant that's going to pull it off of the cake. Okay, and then from here, hold the base of your turntable and just go straight down. And that's going to adhere it to the side of the cake. Go all the way around, and then you can go in a back and forth motion and really smooth this out. And I won't spend a lot of time finishing this, but you can work on this as long as you want and get it as smooth as you want. When you're done, just use a palette knife or a little X-Acto knife or a paring knife and just follow along the bottom of the cake dummy. Again, I'm going to break that so it doesn't pull. And just go around the bottom. Now the nice thing about working with cake dummies, especially for a tiered cake, is that you don't need any dowel rods. You don't need any internal support. So I can stack 2 or 10 cakes together and they're self-supporting. You just put one on top of the other. And that's it. That's how you cover a cake dummy. So when you're done, you can just take it off the cake base and you can set it aside, put it on a cake drum or whatever. I really like letting a dummy cake sit overnight before I decorate it. And this allows the fondant to just dry a little bit, and then when you handle it the next day and you're decorating on it, it's not really soft, you won't leave fingerprints in it. It's just easier to decorate if you let it sit overnight. And again, you can make your own wedding cake or whatever you want, and you can make them days or weeks ahead and it will keep beautifully. The fondant will not melt, it will not run off, it won't rot. It'll actually dry and it'll be preserved and it will last for months and months and months.